something that you can discuss. But the SWOT analysis is composed of factors affecting the company, both internally and externally. And those factors can be positive or negative. Okay, so sometimes you can get a question, a case study in your examination that requires you to conduct a SWOT analysis. Okay, let's talk about the value chain. Value chain is the value chain is another framework. It's another model that is supposed to help companies conduct an assessment, an understanding of the various activities that happen within the company and whether those activities add value or they suck value out of a business or they destroy value out of a business. But rather, you need to understand that those activities can be categorized in two ways. We have support activities and we also have primary activities. Once you conduct a value chain, you should therefore decide whether it's appropriate to have all those activities provided internally, or whether it is wise for some of those activities to be provided outsourced. So I have seen many questions on the value chain, and sometimes they give you a case study from any sector. It is expected that you have a minimal understanding of some common industries, such as manufacturing, such as tourism, such as education, electronic equipment, those things. Okay. All right. Perfect. Great. So let's talk about stakeholder management. That was the first part, was about environmental analysis. Now we're going to the second part, which is stakeholder management. Any company is expected to have stakeholders. I'm sure you all know stakeholders that companies have. These can range from shareholders to the public, the community, and all stakeholders in between. Stakeholder mapping is a framework that helps companies and of course managers to understand those stakeholders, but also have a solid understanding of their power and attention. So the dynamic between power and attention. Power can also be known as influence. Attention can be also called attention can also be called interest. So the stakeholder mapping, therefore, is a concept which is used to understand your key stakeholders versus not so important stakeholders, and what to do for each of those stakeholders. So you will see some questions in the past papers that have case studies about stakeholders who are important, and those are in zone A or quadrant A, those that are powerful but not interested in what you're doing. Those are so-called sleeping giants. Then you have those that are not this, they are less powerful, but they are pretty much interested in what is happening. And those are called gadflies, and these are usually employees. And then irrelevance. Those who are not powerful and not interested. Something else that you might see in your examination is business ethics. Yeah. And business ethics has to do with morality. What is considered to be right and what is considered to be wrong. In your examination, you might get a question that has a case study that has unethical behavior. Yeah, unethical behavior. What kind of unethical behavior do you expect? You know, there might be things like environmental degradation, things like mistreatment of employees, sexual harassment, you know, unsafe working environment. These things can be considered unethical, and so or maybe manipulation of accounting or reports. This can all be considered to be unethical, and so you might get some of unethical behavior included in your case study, and then you are asked to discuss them. We're moving to something else, something called culture. Culture is a set of taken for granted assumptions that you know, these are assumptions, behaviors that an organization swears by. And one of the common models of culture that you would get in your examination, is the culture web. The culture web is a combination of various factors that together make what we call culture. And as you can see on the diagram, those are various elements of a company's culture. So you might get an examination, a case study that has some sort of information on on each of those factors. And then you are expected to conduct a culture web and discuss those factors and the company's culture. That brings us to the end of chapter number 2. Do you have any questions? Again, I'm going to pause here for 1 minute in case you have questions.
For this, ask. Kandi wasanga utari kurikodinga. Bari kodinga ibi.
All right, so it looks like we don't have any question. We are going to continue with chapter number 3. So chapter number 3 is about strategic choices. And remember in chapter number 1, we talked about levels of strategic planning, and we said there are 3 levels of strategic planning. And those are corporate level strategy, business level strategy, and functional strategy. Excuse me. And in this chapter, we are going to talk about corporate level strategy, and then talk about business level strategy, and then talk about all things that are surrounding these 2 elements. So such as entrepreneurship, strategy development, as well as assessment of strategies. Starting with the corporate level strategy, we have a model that can help you establish a company's corporate strategy by deciding strategic options or a strategic direction that a company may take or may make. This is called the Ansoff matrix. The Ansoff matrix is a model that is aimed at ensuring that a company has an option that it can choose in terms of growing. And there are 4 options. We have market penetration, market development, product development, and diversification. These models, these strategic options, usually what a company may choose. I encourage you to go and read about each of them and how a company can apply it, and under what circumstances can a company apply this kind of strategy. Let's now talk about a corporate center. A corporate center is like a headquarter, but rather not the headquarter in the sense of a headquarter, but we think about this as from the angle of a conglomerate. A conglomerate is a company that has multiple investments, and therefore there is a center that is supposed to make decisions on those is supposed to make decisions about those kinds of investments. There are 3 types of corporate centers. We have a portfolio manager, a synergy manager, and a parental developer. A portfolio manager simply invests in investments, but then allows those investments to grow on their own with minimal involvement. A synergy manager is essentially about creating synergy between multiple investments. A parental developer is a company that is essentially heavily involved in the development of those investments or those subsidiaries. Now let's talk about let's talk about 3 portfolio management strategies or portfolio management models. Yeah, I think that's the right one. Portfolio management models. Portfolio management, let's actually start with the first one. The first one, the BCG. So these models are supposed to help you manage your portfolio. If you have multiple investments, or maybe you have multiple strategic business units, these models are supposed to help you manage those models. Right. The BCG matrix. The BCG is an abbreviation of Boston Consulting Group. Boston Consulting Group is a consulting company. It's a giant consulting company. And it came up with a model that is called the BCG Growth Share Matrix. It identifies 4 types of products or investments that a company may have, and gives advice on how to manage and what kind of strategies a company should adopt for each product at every stage. Okay. Again, because of time, I'm not going to be able to explain this in detail, but the BCG matrix is one of the concepts that you should consider taking a look at. Second model is the directional policy matrix. The directional policy matrix for it is mainly about the strength of the business unit versus the long-term market attractiveness. So a company is expected to examine business units it has in its portfolio and decide which ones have a very good market potential in future, and then decide whether to continue to invest heavily in those business units or to simply let them die. The third and last one is the Ashridge portfolio display. The Ashridge portfolio display is a model that is supposed to help a company decide, especially the corporate parent, whether there is a fit between the center or the parent and the portfolio or the business unit or the product. If there is match and the skills and the resources at the center, if they match those that are within the subsidiary or the parent, sorry, the product or the business unit, then we call that heartland businesses. There's a good match and fit. However, if there is no match, we call those ones value trap businesses. Aryan businesses. Aryan businesses. Aryan businesses are clear misfits. Companies you can see and know, these are not my type of business. And then you have anywhere in between. You have value traps, which are businesses that appear as though they present value, but they are traps. Yeah. There is nothing you can add in terms of value. And then you have what we call the ballast businesses. The ballast businesses are those kinds of business that you just they are not good businesses. Yeah, they are good. They are not good businesses. Well, I think let me change. They are good businesses, but they can operate independently. They can operate independently. So you don't need to invest in those businesses. Or if you decide to invest in them, just let them operate independently. There is nothing you are going to bring in those kinds of businesses. Okay. Let's talk about competitive advantage. That was
Isn't it generic?
corporate level strategy. Now we are going to discuss business level strategy. And the most common type of question you can get from this is Michael Porter's generic strategies. Michael Porter developed this model that has 3 or 4 strategies: cost leadership, differentiation, focus, and there is another one we usually call hybrid. Yeah, hybrid. Hybrid businesses are usually a combination of these, the cost leadership, differentiation. I encourage you all to go read about Michael Porter's generic strategies because it is one of those mostly commonly asked questions. But cost leadership is essentially producing a product at a much lower cost compared to your competitors, and differentiation is essentially being unique. There's something we call the strategy clock. The strategy clock is the strategy clock is another model which is similar to Michael Porter's generic strategies. The difference is that instead of using cost as the determinant for competitiveness, this model uses something we call price. Okay, but everything else remains the same. So in other words, instead of saying that the company becomes competitive because of the cost of production, which is cheaper, we simply say the company becomes competitive because it offers products at the cheapest prices relative to its competitors. Game theory is another model under competitive advantage, and the most common or type of game theory is prisoner's dilemma, which is demonstrated here. I'm sure many of you have been
dilemma.
You've come across the prisoner's dilemma. If not, I encourage you to go and read about it. And then we talked about strategy development. Strategy development is essentially about how you develop your strategy, whatever strategy it is. And there are 2 main types. We have organic and artificial. Organic development, of course, is concerned with growing your company naturally, yeah, organically. And then artificial has 2 types: mergers and acquisitions, as well as strategic alliances. Mergers and acquisitions, of course, is something you already know. And the strategic alliances is a typical example of strategic alliance is a joint venture. Yeah, those are alliances between two companies that usually do not involve companies coming together 100%. They are simply alliances that are temporary. And finally, it's something we call the criteria for evaluating strategies. And this is usually called the SAFE criteria. The SAFE criteria is a criteria for evaluating a strategy before that strategy is implemented. So before you implement a strategy, you simply check whether that strategy is suitable, acceptable, feasible, and whether it generally really is a good strategy. And this is something that usually the board does before approving a strategy. Now, before we move on to chapter number 4, is there any question? And I'm going to pause for 1 minute in case there is anyone who has a question. All right. So, and yet, would you like to unmute and tell me which part of the game theory you'd like me to repeat?
You talked about the prisoners, the famous prisoners theory. I didn't understand anything on the prisoners. Right.
Prisoner's dilemma, okay.
Yes.
Prisoner's dilemma is a model that simply assumes that there are two prisoners who have been arrested and they're accused of the same crime. But those prisoners are kept in two separate cells and they cannot communicate with each other. And then each one of them is given an offer to speak the truth and they are offered something in return. So, for instance, assuming this is you, They tell you if you stay silent and your partner stays silent, you are both free. However, if you stay silent and your partner speaks, you get 5 years in prison and your partner only gets 2 years. Vice versa. If you both speak, you get 2 years in prison. If you only speak and your partner does not speak, you get 2 years and she or he gets 5 years in prison. So what it requires is that you must get into the head of your partner. Yeah. Try to get into the head of your partner and say, okay, my partner or my accomplice, what are they likely to do or say? And then decide the best course of action based on the likely reaction of your partner. This is applicable in business because before you take any strategic decision, you have to always imagine how your competitors are likely to react. Sometimes, for instance, you can reduce the price of your products, thinking this is going to earn you more customers, but in effect, it becomes a disadvantage because then it can create a price war where your competitors can also charge lower prices, and then it becomes detrimental to you. So it requires to be very, very smart and think about the likely impact of your customers. Okay. So that is the prisoner's dilemma. There is someone else who said, Nadine, can you come and let me know which part of the strategic rock you want me to repeat?
So you said that it is the same as the marketers, but I don't understand where it is a difference. Can you explain it again?
Okay. The difference is on the price. If you see Michael Porter, it has cost as a driver of competitiveness, and of course, it has differentiation. When you come to the strategic rock, we have differentiation, so differentiation does not change, but we have raw price. I said hybrid is also common in Michael Porter's generic strategies, although it doesn't show on the diagram, but if you go into your notes, you'll find it. However, they substitute cost leadership with price. And the difference is, whilst Michael Porter thinks that what makes you competitive is by producing a service or a product at the lowest cost of production, Cliff Bowman, who is the initiator of this model, suggests that you can only become competitive not by cost, because customers do not care about the cost of production, but rather by the price. So by charging the lowest price on the market. Okay. Hopefully that's clearer. Now let's continue to chapter number 4. And this is about the audit function to strategy implementation. Okay, someone says I should increase the volume. Can I check whether, you people, others, can hear me very well? This might be your device's volume. Yeah. So if others can hear me very well, then it might be your very specific device's volume. Unless all of you cannot hear me very well, in which case I ask you to let me know if you can't hear me very well. Okay. Someone says, I think I've seen 2 people who have said they can hear me well. So I would push the button back to you and say, check your device's volume. So in chapter number 4, we're going to talk about structure and the processes. The first concept I encourage you to review or to read is organizational structure. Organizational structure is essentially about how organizations are structured. How organizations are structured. In other words, what is the structure of an organization? Okay, what is the structure of the company? And there are 5 types of structures. Because of time, I'm not going to be able to explain everything, but you are supposed to go and understand these 5 structures: functional, divisional, matrix, process, and a network. Usually, ICPAR examines on the first 3, usually. Not all the time, but usually. Functional, divisional, matrix. And of course, remember to check advantages and disadvantages. Okay. Something else that you might get in your examination is the balance scorecard. The balance scorecard is an attempt by 2 researchers, Robert Kaplan and David Norton, to assess the performance of the company in other ways other than financial. Because before 1990s, many companies only evaluated the performance of the company in financial terms. But these 2 researchers said that there are other ways you can measure the performance of a company. And you can measure the performance of a company, of course, financially. And you guys are very good with financial assessment. But there are other ways you can measure performance. Are customers happy? Learning and growth. Are you growing and learning as a company? Are you improving as a company with time? Internal processes. Yeah. Whatever processes you have, whatever activities you have, do they add value to shareholders? Yeah. Those are the 4 ways you can measure the performance of the company. And therefore, you can get a question that asks you to examine the performance of a company. Let's talk about managing key enablers. How many enablers do we have? How many factors enable the success of a company's strategy? There are 4. We have people, we have money, we have information, and we have technology. However, in this chapter, we are only going to talk about 3 enabling factors. And those are people, information, and technology. finance is not something we are going to talk about. Why? Because you study finance in other modules. And information as well as technology, we are going to combine these two. But meanwhile, we are going to start with people, and it's going to be the biggest chunk. People. You might get a question from any of these factors here. Human resource planning, which is the planning of people, both currently and in future. Yeah, how many people you will need to do what, when. Those are the kinds of questions you ask yourself when you are conducting a human resource planning. Recruitment is mainly about bringing the right people at the job. And then you have terms and conditions. These are contracts. So you need to make sure you have proper contracts. And then you have screening and shortlisting. And then you have selection. Of course, screening and shortlisting is something you already know. Selection is essentially selecting the right candidate. Induction is introducing the new employee to the job and making their transition to work as smooth as possible. Training and development. And then you have grievance procedures, which is, if people are unhappy about something, where do they report and what are the procedures of handling those differences in understanding and being unhappy. Performance appraisal. Performance appraisal is
the work performed.
Performance appraisal is essentially about managing the performance, managing the performance of a company and its employees, and making sure that people are doing what they're supposed to do, evaluating the performance and being able to point people to the right direction if it is deemed that some of them are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then compensation. Compensation is mainly about determining the right compensation for people. And right sizing the organization is mainly about the right people, the right number of people. Disciplinary action is disciplining people, of course, and termination, which is usually the last thing you want to do in an organization, but which inevitably happens for different reasons. Yeah. Now, something else we need to talk about. What is leadership? Leadership is essentially about influencing a group of people to achieve a certain set of objectives. And researcher called Kresh and others came up with, is it 9 maybe? Is it 9? Is it? It's probably 9. 14 actually. 14 leadership functions that people in leadership positions can do. And I'm not going to talk about all of them because you can read them, but this is something you can get in your question. Now there are leadership theories, and these leadership theories something that you might get in your examination. Let's start with contemporary leadership models, and maybe actually what I should say is usually expect at least one leadership question in your examination. Yeah, expect at least one leadership question. Now, the first one is Level 5 leadership. Level 5 leadership is a concept that was coined by Jim Collins in his book, From Goods to Great. And it talks about how leaders improve from becoming capable to level 5. And it says that a level 5 leader is a leader who has two main features or qualities. Number one is someone who has humor or humility, not humor, humility. Humility is a lack of ego. And then number two is will or determination to do what is required. Okay. Yeah. So that is so that's level 5. And according to Jim Collins, people are supposed to and expected to do they're expected to good leaders as expected to have those two features. This question, level 5 leadership, has been asked once before. Servant leadership is not something I've not seen. But a servant leader is someone who serves others. Yeah. Someone who is not really serving their interest, but serving others. Okay. That is someone we call a servant leader. And then we have authentic leadership. Authentic leadership. Authentic comes from the word, of course, authenticity. Authenticity is being true to yourself, being original, being yourself. Okay. And so being open. And so, yeah, an authentic leader is someone who has those features. And then we have someone we call interactive leader. An interactive leader is someone who likes to get consensus from other people before a decision is made. Okay. And so there are some leaders who are like that. Some leaders who like to get consensus. Now let's talk about behavior leadership approaches. Behavior leadership approaches, those approaches that simply suggest that a leader becomes a leader because of the behaviors they have. And the first model is the task versus people. And all behavior leadership approaches are built on this concept that some leaders are task-oriented, others are people-oriented. Leaders who are task-oriented are those leaders that only focus mainly on production, work, output. And the people-oriented leaders are those leaders that are concerned with the well-being of their staff, the employees. And this is a result of work by Ohio State University and the University of Michigan in the United States of America. Second model, the Blake and Morton managerial grid, which is also known as the leadership grid. And this is probably the most examined leadership theory or approach. What does it say? It talks about leaders being either people-oriented or task-oriented. And it is a grid that has 5 leadership styles along the way. On one extreme end, you have team leadership style, which is a leadership style that excels at both production and the welfare of staff. On the other extreme side, you have impoverished management, and these are researchers, these are leaders who do not care about work as well as people. And then you have middle of the road. Those are 50-50. Country club, those are leaders who are excellent at ensuring the well-being of people, but don't really care too much about production output. And the opposite of that is authority compliance. Authority compliance are leaders that essentially only care about the production output, work. They don't really care about the well-being of people or the concerns of people. Let's talk about the contingency leadership approach. First one is the situational theory. Situational theory by 2 researchers called Hussey and Branchard, or Brancard. This is a model that it categorizes leadership styles into 4 stages. Yeah. Stage number 1 is S1, which is the telling style. Stage number 2 is selling style. Stage number 3 is, or style number 3 is participating style, and the last one is delegating style. From S1 to S4, those stages change depending, and this model is mainly about followers, that a leader must adjust their approach in relation to the characteristics of the followers. Style number 1 should be used where followers do not have skills and they are not also confident. Whereas style number 4 is where you are leading a team of professionals who are both skilled and confident. Approach number 2 is Fiedler's contingency theory. Fiedler's contingency theory is a theory that talks about when it is favorable to be a task-oriented leader and when it is unfavorable. It also talks about when it is favorable to be a relationship-oriented leader or not. It says that it is essentially important for you as a leader to understand when it is favorable for you to apply each of those leadership styles. Okay, and it depends on 3 factors: the leader-member relations, the task structure, and the leader position power. Okay. Number 3 is the path goal contingency theory. The path goal contingency theory is it's a leadership model which suggests that people believe that the role of the leader is to motivate employees, is to motivate staff. That people's output will always be based on the leader's ability to motivate them. Yeah, that is the path goal contingency theory. I've never seen a question on this, by the way. And the final one is the situational substitute for leadership. This model suggests that there are some variables that may make the need of the leader unnecessary. Yeah, so there might be some circumstances where the leader is unnecessary. Yeah, there might be some conditions that might substitute a leader. All right. So we are now done with leadership approaches, and now let's talk about information technology.
Right.
There are two models under this. One is the McFarland and McCartney strategic grid, and the second one is Professor Al's 9 reasons for an IT strategy. Let's start with McFarland and McCartney strategic grid. This is a model that essentially tasks business leaders to obtain an understanding of the importance of information technology today and tomorrow. And they determine essentially whether IT is going to be important tomorrow. And if it is going to be important, then this is where Professor Al's 9 reasons for an IT strategy come in. Professor Al is a professor at the London School of Economics who suggests that every company should have an IT strategy. Why? Because of those 9 reasons. Because it is cheap, yeah, to have a strategy. In other words, it is expensive not to have a strategy. Or in other words, IT is expensive, so you should really have a plan, okay? Great. So that is IT. Now let's move on to something different. Managing the change process. Okay. I'm sure you all know you are probably going to get a question on resistance to change. Why do people resist change? Yeah, and then why? Actually, before this, we should talk about the resistance to change. People resist change because of self-interest, because of tolerance, no tolerance for change, misinformation, misunderstanding, and so on. How can you resolve that? Education, communication, participation, involvement, facilitation, support. The last ones are not usually good, but those are the things you can apply when the first fail. The Cat-Lewin force field analysis is a model that has been examined maybe twice, and it is a model that essentially talks about the that talks about the forces for change and the forces against change. In other words, before you implement change, use this analysis to determine whether this change is good or not. Okay. Assign a score to each of the factors, the benefits and the disadvantages of the change. When the disadvantages outweigh the advantages, do not change. If the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, then change. It also helps you to determine the forces or the factors that are against change and attempt to minimize the impact or the strength of those negative factors. Okay, tackle them before you implement change. We have already seen that, so let's talk about teamwork. Under teamwork, one concept you are likely to get is the Dr. Meredith Belbin's 9 roles. And these are 9 roles. In other words, people contribute differently on a team. Some people can be resource investigators, others can be specialists. So please take time and read about these team roles and what people simply help with in in a teamwork. Something else you can expect to see in your examination is the 5 stages to team development by someone called Bruce Tuckman. Bruce Tuckman suggests that people usually are brought together in a team. And when they are brought together in a team, they initially disagree on a number of things because of cultural differences, because of unaligned expectations, and so on and so forth. Number 3 is norming. Norming is someone that is a stage when people are starting to normalize. People are starting to understand each other and their position in a team, and therefore they are starting to perform, which leads to the performing stage. And then finally, you get to adjourning, which is that stage when people are disbanding and the people are also celebrating their wins and recognizing people's contributions. There's a concept called groupthink. Irving Janis is a concept that brought a concept called groupthink. Groupthink is a concept where people have been working with each other for a long time, that they have been working a long time with each other, that they start fearing opposition, or dissent. In other words, people become so close that they fear to disagree. Okay, and when that happens, you end up having less innovation and poor decisions being made because people are not scrutinizing decisions and ideas. Communication is something that might also get in your examination, especially listening. What this essentially means is that we need to understand how to listen. We need to be good listeners. And you need to read about how to be a good listener. Okay, because I saw a question on that as well. And project management, start with a work breakdown structure, which is really like a diagrammatic illustration of activities of a project. So this is something you can get in your examination. And then there's something we call a CPA. A CPA is a concept that is used in project management, whereby you demonstrate activities of a project and their dependencies on a diagram that looks like what you can see on the screen. Usually you are given activities, their predecessors, and the durations. Then you are expected to draw activities on a diagram like the one you can see below, and eventually determine the critical path, which is the key activities that must be completed on time for the project to eventually be completed on time. Secondly, this model helps you to determine how long a project will take.
to be completed.
I encourage you to go and read about how to formulate a CPA. And the same is true for a Gantt chart. A Gantt chart is another diagrammatic illustration which shows how activities will follow each other week by week or month by month or day by day, and how long they will take on a diagram. It also is eventually demonstrates how long a project will take from when it will start to when it will end. Something else you need to understand is the role of the project sponsor, the project manager, as well as the project members, which are here, of course. So I'm not really going to explain. Now, the last part in this chapter is on strategy evaluation. Remember, we talked about strategy evaluation called SAFE, suitability, acceptability, feasibility, as well as evaluation. Those are criteria for evaluating a strategy before implementation. The results chain analysis is a strategy or a model that is used to evaluate a strategy after it has been implemented. So this is a post strategy evaluation. Now we have something we call the results chain, and the results chain is a simple model. It is a model that requires that you check whether a strategy has achieved the impact that you wanted it to achieve. You must have determined the desired impact at the beginning. So whatever you have achieved, whatever you have done, did it achieve what you wanted to achieve? And for you to make that assessment, you need to evaluate the inputs that you invested, the activities you performed, the outputs that you produced, and the outcomes, as well as the long-term impact. Okay. Now, before we go to chapter number 5, I would like to first check whether you have any question. And after answering those questions, we are going to take a short break and come back and do chapter number 5, but also discuss about question and answer approach. So, questions first. Any questions on this chapter? Chapter 4.
nuko evaluwa strategy nyuma yo kureba bya bindi byo gusetinga harya bya safe suitability acceptability na acceptable feasibility and evaluation.
Okay. So, since we have no questions, let's take a break. I am going to project something here which shows when we will come back from the break, and then move on to the next chapter, and of course continue to do other things I've said we are going to do. So stay tuned, and you're going to see when we are going to come back. So feel free to go grab a cup of tea or and then we'll come back.
Result chain goal harimo utuntu Implementation and result. Implementation means put in action. Cumi n'ine. Ngo ni n'itanu mbese. Ko ndi kubona biri ku the things are getting comering man. Ibyo ntaho bihuriye rero. Konje nta ahubwo ntuza na updatinze niyo imbabaje ntasoje. Aho nshobora kuzaza nje gukora iki? Nza gukora iki hano? Ariko hano mfite intuze rero. Shira zazivamo izi expropriation nk'izanyu. Bitarabona ifaranga.
Ubona abaturage bahehe?
Ntabwo ari abaturage da. Ni izantuye. Iz'amaradiyo n'amateleviziyo.
Nose zo mu kazi zikora gutya ntabwo uri kubyumva.
Yewe nuko mbigereranyije nabyo gusa.
Namayibwese. Muri kimwe kuri mishisi. Kuri mishi.
Twe ntimani dusaba amafaranga Minecofin ubwo yitaraduha nyine turaparika.
Rero byo kwangisha.
Neza wagize ngo hari nimwe mba mfite y'abo amafaranga bahari. Ntabwo ari nkamwe muhita mupyatura. Mwebwe niyo mpamvu musanga kenshi muri smart.
material ndetse witwaga amande
Hmm?
ya material y'ipamba kuma space ndetse byasaba utari kuri metri byasaba iki cyo ubwira sasa
hakaye niko
uketse ubwo naguze nka polisi account ugashaka kugira ngo ngire amafaranga
gute se gute
gute yego nkari gusensyo
yego biba byakunda
byakunda ubwo cyangwa cyo kitari zasonuka
ariko ubundi guhindura byo ntuze structure niko bigenda ntabwo ubundi bahindura umwanya udakoze ikizami
kabisa
barabikora bikaba intano ariko ugakora
abataza zanguze bagire nka project accountant baba nk'imwe magana 200 buriya
simbizi
cyangwa miliyoni
icyo wakora cyose bahinduye izina ry'umwanya nzi ko aho hagomba gukorwa ikizami
oya nyine ngo nyine kuba babyihorera
babyihorera
nyine ibintu nani nyine ku gushyiraho space za nyine urumva n'ibintu byakorana
byari
kuba project accountant ahubwo abene gusensa nyine ubongera umushahara nsabwa mu buryo busegisa
structure se nta kibazo n'umushahara n'amayindegisi n'ibiki byose yego gasa si yigoye ra njya numva ari yigoye njye niko mbyumva kuri bo ariko niba bumva byashoboka sava we ntago bikureba ibyo ntibikureba ariko numva kuri bo aribyo byaba bigoye kuko n'uwaza yavuga ati mwongeje amafaranga mushingiye kuki niba abari kuri structure imwe nawe bayahembwa mukubise ikizami nibura ngo uhindure umwanya ati yabitsinze yatari kuri bo nyine niko ntekereza ariko kuri wowe ibyo ntacyo bikubwiye nibyo byoroshye ahubwo njye numva kuri bo mu gihe haba habayeho ba bagenzuzi b'umurimo bajya baza kandi nzi ko baza buri gihe hasi na auditor general ajya anabireba ariko nabyo ibyo ntibiba bikureba uwo yaguha amafaranga kubaza ngo kuki wayemeye hari uwakubaza ngo kuki wayemeye zigurine nzaba mfite ibi binyagwa ukuntu nzaba mfite ibi bitabo byombi ejo bundi.
umunsi wigende ibintu cyane cyane bikunze no kimwe umunsi ikibazo cyogende sinzi ko uzagenze bamufashe
Ibyo nabyo ni ukubeshya. Mu nyuguti enye.
Okay, so we are right back. I'm going to share my screen.
Ibyo ni ibinyoma filime.
So we are now going to move to chapter number 5.
Iyi ni PowerPoint ariko
And chapter number 5 is
reading
mainly
a
about
strategy.
leading a strategy. So that's a combination of leadership as well as strategy. The first element we're going to talk about is a combination of leadership and strategic leadership. Strategic leadership is essentially being transformational in your leadership capabilities and taking action moving an organization from one stage to another. There are three types of leaders in that caliber, in that context. You have a visionary leader, who is someone who really focuses more on dreaming about the future. And on the other extreme, you have a managerial leader. A managerial leader is someone who is a manager, is good at establishing systems and processes that are essential for a company's effectiveness. And then you have a strategic leader. A strategic leader is someone who combines the best of visionary leadership as well as managerial leadership. These, although very rare to find, are leaders who can transform a company through different stages. And these are the desired type of leaders that we wish to have, that we should have. Now, as I said, strategic leadership is the ability to anticipate, envision, maintain flexibility, and empower others to create strategic change as might be necessary. And the diagram you can see on the right is sort of like the process for effective strategic leadership. It requires you to have an intent, a mission, actions, and implementing those actions to get a result that is obviously above average. What you usually get in your examination is these key strategic leadership actions. Any leader is expected to determine a direction that a company should be taking, explore core competences within the company, develop people, sustain a culture, emphasize ethical practices, and establish a balanced organizational control. And that, my friend, is the end of the syllabus. And I want to remind you that although the slides covered a big chunk of what must be covered in the syllabus, there were some concepts that I intentionally left out. One, because of the time. Two, because they were considered to be relatively easy for you to understand on your own. So, do not only focus your revision on everything you saw, on only the aspects you saw in these slides. There are other things that you need to read, and you can only understand what you need to read comprehensively by going through the syllabus, as I said from the beginning. That said, let's take a look at the format of the examination. But maybe before we talk about the format of the examination, I'm going to give you another 1 minute in case you have questions that you want to ask.
Assessment is by an open book examination of 3 or 5 hours duration. This examination uses a case study approach to test the student ability to apply critical analysis, demonstrate synthesis, and decision making. It consists of one of compulsory question based on major case study worth 50% of the marks for the examination. Then a choice of 2 out of 3 optional questions, each worth 25 of the marks for the examination. The optional question may also refer to material in the major case study.
Okay, no questions. So let's talk about the examination. We have an open book type of a question or question paper, which means that you are allowed to go with your study materials. Your examination typically is supposed to be attempted in 3.5 hours. And then you are given an additional 15 minutes
to read
for reading. This examination has 2 sections, A and B. And section A has 1 question which is compulsory. Compulsory means you must attempt it. It's not optional. Section B has 3 optional questions. You are expected to choose 2.
2 of them
out of those 3. So in total, you must attempt 3 questions out of the 4 in the paper. Your examination is going to be a case study type of question paper. What we are looking for is to determine whether you are able to apply critical analysis and demonstrate synthesis and the decision making. Now, let's talk about exam tips. Number 1, please remember to read instructions every time you attempt a paper. Please do not rush to answer when you are given a question paper. Take a pause, take a few deep breaths, and read the question paper in ways that I will explain later before you start attempting. You must also read questions carefully. What I usually say is read a question, especially the requirement, more than once. Ensure that time management is spot on. What does that mean? It means that question number 1 should be attempted in about 100 minutes. 100 minutes is 1 hour and 40 minutes. Time yourself, ensure that you attempt in that period. Questions 2 to 4 or questions in section B should be attempted in 50 minutes.
Calculator yanjye nta saha iba muze nzajyana nzagurira saha.
In other words, each question should be attempted in 50 minutes. So that's just below 1 hour. That we review with a couple of minutes at the end to patch some missing gaps in your paper. Choose questions wisely, especially those in section B. Those questions that you think you can do better should be attempted first, regardless of whether those questions are in section B or A.
Titaye niba ari A or B. Icyo wumva wakora neza gikore.
Read the requirement more than once. I think I said that. When you are answering the question, first explain the concept,
Before applying.
the key concept, the key topic in an examination requirement before you before you answer what you've been asked. I'm going to combine that with the recommendation to draw diagrams where they are due. If you see something in your a diagram in your textbook, draw it when you are explaining that concept before you start answering. Please use your book, your textbook, or your study materials as a guide only. In other words, refer to the case study. Do not copy and paste everything 100%. Remember to relate to the case study.
Gikoresha sentence. Nibura ngo interuro enye cyangwa ebyiri.
Do not answer your question using bullet points. Use full sentences instead. Please start a new question on a new page. Needless to say, be mindful of your handwriting. Poor handwriting usually results in poor marks. If the marker cannot read what you've written, they will not give you marks. Good marks. Remember to attempt 3 questions in total, including question number 1. I should also say that attempting all 4 questions usually puts you at a disadvantage more than it puts you at an advantage. The examination has been structured to be attempted in 3 hours and 30 minutes only when you have answered 3 questions. If you have answered 4 questions, it is very likely that none of those questions has been answered appropriately, or at least some of the questions. Do not mix up questions. When you start a question, finish it. If you can't finish it, leave some space to come back later. Please answer in English only. Take a calculator. You may need it. So there is someone who has asked about which materials to take in the examination, and and which ones are not allowed? That is a question that ICPAD should answer. So whatever I'm going to say here is not set in stone, and you are encouraged to seek advice from ICPAD. But my understanding is you are allowed to take any material that you need. There is no quota. There is no requirement. But obviously, you are expected to take a reasonable amount of study materials. You cannot take materials that are full of a track to the examination. No. You are expected to take some, reasonable amount. Don't take textbooks that are too much to fill in a room. Okay, because you will not, be able to use them anyway. So anything really that you think is useful for you, print it, take it. You are not allowed to take electronic devices, and so soft copies are not allowed. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to find a question, but before maybe I do it, do you have some questions that you have from what I've just said?
Enablers, people. What is people? Na resource ni kirano. Resource harimo people na finance. Hamwe information and technology. Ariyo twazibonye hera mu kanya.
So Henriette has asked a question about taking a calculator. I'm going to show you a question that required to use a calculator. And that question, this question, yeah. You see this question, this was question number 4 of which sitting?
July 2022.
July 2022.
Sinzi ukuntu
This was question number 4.
ariko
The question,
July,
as you can see, was about a sports business, but it had these projected sales. The numbers are here. So that's chapter number 1, by the way, in your textbook, marketing plan. And then
ikibazo ko ntigeze ngikoraho
You see, it has average unit price for revenue and variable cost and fixed costs. And then they said, assume you are Mrs. Kairebga Sharon and draft a marketing plan for the company based on the information in the case study. And then they said, note, round your calculations, if any, off to two decimal places. Were there computation? Let me show you answer.
agiye kutwereka ansamo agiye kutwereka ansa si icya kane se
So of course, I had showed you about what you should do on a marketing plan. So there was an executive summary, situational analysis, marketing strategy, marketing tactics, financial projections. This is where now the issue was. You had to compute break-even analysis.
break-even analysis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Break-even analysis in terms of unit sales was here, and then in amount it was here. And then, in addition to that, you had to calculate sales forecast. You were given numbers for 2023, so you were supposed to calculate the figures for 2024 and 2025. There were percentages that were given in the case study. And the sales forecast as well. You have to calculate that. Okay. So it's not common, but it's not impossible. Sometimes you can get a question that requires you to calculate something. Let me also show you something in the book. Remember when we said the SAFE method?
Yeah, SAFE.
Suitability, accessibility, feasibility. Under feasibility, there is where you are supposed to calculate financial feasibility. And under financial feasibility, you can be asked to compute some ratios. Yeah? Where did I take these things? Yeah, you can see them here. Yeah? Short-term solvency, quick ratio, cash ratio, total debt ratio, debt equity ratio, these kinds of ratios. Okay, and then you might be asked to examine to answer something like that and advise whether this is acceptable or not. Okay. So that's a question. Febroni says, if it is, and please, when I give you an explanation and you are not convinced, always come back and ask. Okay, come back and ask me if any of what I've said is clarified, basically. Let's talk about this question from Febroni, which says, if it is possible, can you share with us this summary as soon, because Iqbal gives us them at the last time. Of course, I don't have your emails, so I usually give it to Iqbal to share it with you. So I will perhaps talk to Iqbal and see if they can share this with you as soon as possible. But I wanted to do something. Now that we are actually in this paper, let's start by doing something. We're going to discuss how we can approach a question, or how we should approach a question. And I said there are 3 ways you can approach a question. Yeah? 3 ways you can approach a question. How can you approach a question?
Strategy implementation.
Number 1 is identify and explain a topic, the main topic, the main concept. Number 2, draw a diagram if there is a diagram. Number 3, answer the question that you have been asked. Number 4, give some examples, if any. So what I'm going to do in this paper where we are right now, from question number 1 to question number 4, I am going to ask you to identify the key concept. So part A of this question, this is question number 4 probably. Question number 4. Yeah, question number 4, part A. I am going to, all of you, those of you who are interested, of course. I know some of you might not be interested, but if you are interested, I want you to type in the chat and tell me this question, part A, what do you think is the main concept that we should explain? Thank you to those of you who are answering. Thank you, Feza. Thank you, User. Thank you, Ja. And yet, thank you, DJ. I don't know who is DJ, but thank you. No. DJ, you are saying which paper? Okay. Don't mind about the paper. Just simply answer that question. I will tell you the paper. But this is probably July 2022. Thank you, Jean Damascene. Another user, IYG, Auguste, Febroni, and DJ. Thank you for trying. most of you got it right. The main concept here is the marketing plan. So what should you do when you are answering? Go to your textbook. Yeah? Go to your textbook and go to your textbook or whatever material you have, and first before you answer the question, first explain the concept of marketing plan. Yeah, assuming this is your textbook, go check where there is a marketing plan and then what a marketing plan means. You can come and only copy this part. Yeah, this this part here. A marketing plan is a written document that summarizes what the marketer has learned about the marketplace and indicates how the firm plans to reach its marketing objectives. You can also add the second sentence if you want. Let me show you how they approached the question. A marketing plan is a written document that summarizes what the marketer has done. So this is the answer that was provided by ICPAD. It contains the tactical, so they simply copied this part. This part kujazanga right here. Yeah, this is what they provided as the answer. And they started answering the question. They started providing the marketing plan. Why? Because there is no diagram in your notes. Okay, so that is a very, very important. And why am I saying that? Because if you go into the marking guide, you will see that question number 4, they will say that award 2 marks for a good marketing plan format, which should have a minimum of, okay, this is something else. Okay, I see this time. Oh, no. I think I got somewhere else. All right. So this time they did not award marks for an introduction, but usually